Afghanistan's security shaken once again. We look at the fallout from one of the worst attacks on the country's military. Also on today's program, Chechnyas Gay Purge. Authorities are accused of detaining and torturing more than 100 homosexuals. And life as a Rohingya Muslim. A new app lets you experience what it's like to belong to one of the world's most persecuted minorities. I'm Imran Garda, and this is the Newsmakers. It was an attack so severe that it sent the U.S. Secretary of Defense rushing to Kabul and cost two of Afghanistan's top military leaders their jobs. More than 170 people were killed outside the city of Mazar-e-Sharif after Taliban militants rode into a military base disguised as soldiers. Some blew themselves up, others opened fire. The effort to beat back the fighters was chaotic, with commanders and young cadets alike having trouble telling who was friend and who was foe. With attacks like this on the rise, our newsmaker today is Afghanistan's Security, as we ask, how can the government protect its people, and will it mean a bigger U.S. military presence? We begin with this report from Sandra Gutman.
دا ستونزې به په یوه ورځ کې له منځه لاړې شي. دا ډېر پیچلی جنګ دی. که د جنګ فن تاسو ته معلوم وي او لوستی وي، نو د تروریزم سره جنګ په ټوله نړۍ کې چا مخه تر اوسه پورې نه ده نیولې.
The words of a defeated defense minister stepping down from his post after Afghanistan's worst ever terror attack on a military base. The Taliban struck at the heart of Afghanistan's military operations, using gunmen disguised in army uniforms who talked their way inside and shot scores of soldiers. Reports say 170 men were killed, but the victims' families say the number is far higher. They say the lack of an official death count is all to combat perception of a weak and corrupt military that's losing control.
When the government cannot manage its own security, civilians shouldn't expect any security from the government.
According to data from the U.S. mission in Afghanistan, government forces controlled as much as 72% of the country in 2015. The Taliban controlled 7%, and 22% of Afghan land was contested. Compare that to November last year, and Afghan forces have lost more territory. In 2016, the government controlled only 57% of the country. The Taliban's share grew to 10%, and the level of contested districts rose too, to 33%. That same year, the United States spent nearly $3.5 billion on the Afghan Army, Police, and Air Force. Under the Obama administration, the U.S. has been pulling back its forces in Afghanistan, shifting the focus to fighting Daesh and Al-Qaeda. Earlier this month, the U.S. dropped a 10-ton bomb on a Daesh target, a move that critics say was more of a weapons test, targeting a group not seen to be as big a threat as the Taliban. But calls are growing louder for the Trump administration to reconsider its strategy. Top U.S. commanders have said there's a shortfall of a few thousand troops. On a visit to Kabul, Defense Secretary Jim Mattis signaled there may be a new war plan.
President Trump has directed a review of our policy in Afghanistan as the new administration takes hold in Washington. This dictates an ongoing dialogue with Afghanistan's leadership, and that's why I came here.
The need for greater American support appears clear. The question is whether Trump wants to be the president who goes back to Afghanistan. Sandra Gutman, The Newsmakers.
Well, to discuss this, I'm joined by Sadiq Siddiqui from Kabul. He's the director of the Afghan government's Media and Information Center. And also in Kabul, we have Orzala Ashraf Nemat. She's an anthropologist and civil society activist. Thanks, both of you, for joining us. Orzala, if I can begin with you, the defense minister and the army chief resigning after that horrendous Taliban attack, was that the right decision to make?
Well, by resignation of only two key people in the government, we cannot be satisfied with proper reforms in the security sector. there was much more needed to be done because, I mean, of course, a symbolic, resignation of only ministers is going to give a good light in terms of, government's commitment to reform. But the actual fact, I mean, the actual, elements that resulted in such a tragic incident in Mazar Sharif last week requires a much more thorough and in-depth sort of a cleaning up and, reforms that goes down to different, hierarchical, structures of the ministries of defense, interior, and other intelligence, security-related sectors.
Sadiq Siddiqui, can we say that the Afghan government at this moment in time cannot protect its people and its soldiers anymore?
The Afghan people and the Afghan security forces, they are fighting a tough fight. We are here in the front lines of fighting terrorism, international terrorist groups who are very dangerous and they are, they kill people in a very heinous way. I mean, the Afghan forces, they have endured sacrifices to protect its people. But this kind of incidents, that shows the scale of the threats that we are facing here as a country. And the Afghan government, the Afghan security forces, they have been always on the front line to repel any Taliban's attack, and they are, saving Afghanistan from not to become a terrorist safe haven here. So that's a tough fight. We do have our challenges. We do need support from our allies, to help us and support us when it comes to fighting the biggest threat in this part of the world.
Sadiq, those resignations of General Abdullah Habibi and General Qadam Shah Shahim, Orzala says those are just symbolic. Tell me, Sadiq, why those resignations are so important and why in the immediate future they'll make a difference.
Well, the resignation has somehow connection with the incident that happened. That was a massive failure, unfortunately, that the Taliban were able to attack on one of the bases. So there was a need to see this kind of resignation. That was the first time in the recent history of the Afghan government that the top minister resigns because something happens, because something goes wrong. So that has to be regarded that way. People wanted to see that these officials or those officials who are not up to the job, they have to step down, and we need more people, to come in and take more responsibility. That was a very important step to be taken by these individuals, and the government had to decide, had to take some hard decisions so that we can really look into the reforms in the ANSF. But the scale of the threat that we are facing, that's enormous. And we really need to mobilize all potentials internally and internationally to fight this tough fight here in Afghanistan.
Right. Orzala, we can almost confirm and no longer just merely speculate that the Taliban is resurgent, the Haqqani network is resurgent. I mean, the Taliban controls more than a third of the country right now. Are you still optimistic, Orzala, or are there moments that you fear that all those lives, all those sacrifices, all those billions of dollars over the past 15 years to make Afghanistan a strong democracy, do you fear that that has been for nothing?
Well, Afghans in Afghanistan are a nation born to be optimistic. We cannot afford to be pessimistic on Afghanistan and the future of this country as a united, nation trying to survive and also revive in the midst of all these, severe level of threats that we are living under, and in the midst of all the severe level of challenges that we face for being a battleground of not only the fight that is owned by us, but a fight that we are fighting for, a numerous level of, regional and global, players. We are a center of, reflection of conflict between Pakistan and India, between Russians and United States. We are a center of conflict for all.
Orzala, if you'll allow me to interrupt there.
We are optimistic.
Yes, if you'll allow me to interrupt there, because you make a great point, and I don't want to run out of time before I ask Sadiq Siddiqui. Sadiq Siddiqui, she spoke about international players. Is it the position of the Afghan government that Russia is funding and supporting the Taliban?
Well, there are unfortunate reports that there are some support and links by the Russians to the Taliban. We are still looking into these reports. But it will be very unfortunate if any country in the region somehow they make any links to those groups who are behind the killing of many innocent Afghans. So that will not help at all. What we want from the regional countries, from the countries in the region, is that to support the Afghan people, the Afghan government, in its fight against the international terrorism. So the Taliban are, unfortunately, they are not answering or responding to any peace initiatives by the Afghan people. So at this stage, but these countries in the region, they have to realize that this is the Taliban who gave umbrella or who gave shelters to the many other terrorist groups here in this region. So this will be very dangerous to make any connections with the Taliban, with a group like the Taliban, who are killing Afghans every day on daily basis. And that's absolutely something that these countries like Russia has to realize, how it could be harmful for the Afghan people. You know, any connection to the Taliban by any country like Russia, like Pakistan, that will only encourage the Taliban to continue to their fight.
Right. Sadiq,
that will only encourage them to recruit more from those terrorist groups.
Can I ask you absolutely clearly, is that connection clear? From your perspective, is that connection clear between Russia and the Taliban?
Well, that's something that the Russians announced themselves, that yes, they have made some connections. And I tell you this again, if there's any connections made or any support by the Russians to the Taliban, will only encourage the Taliban to continue to their fight. They will be also encouraged to recruit more fighters, foreign fighters, you know, escaping from Daesh in Syria and Iraq to find the shelter, and that shelter will be the Taliban. So there has to be very clear message of any kind of connection to the Taliban, any kind of support to the Taliban will have enormous consequences for the security of the region and security of the world.
Right. Ursula, General Nicholson, in charge of American forces in the region, is asking Washington for more troops. General Mattis got on a flight straight towards Kabul after this attack. As a patriotic Afghan, when so many Afghans for so many years have said the Americans must get the hell out of their country, do you want more American forces at this moment in time to beef up security?
I believe Afghanistan needs an international commitment to secure this country. That commitment does not necessarily have to be through the increase of troops, because Afghanistan definitely has an experience of surge, the military surge of back in 2009, and what happened as a result of that surge. I strongly believe that increasing of troops and a further escalation of war is not a solution to this conflict. The true solution comes when the actual, sources, financial, military, political sources for terrorism, and those who are promoting and pushing terrorism as a weapon against a helpless and against a victim nation, stop and dry up their sources for these, forces who are continuously, killing our youngsters, our men and women across the country. I think that's the best solution. If we find a global commitment by Afghanistan's immediate neighbors, far neighbors, and also the international community to come up with a consensus to leave Afghanistan as a peaceful country. That would be the best solution rather than increasing or decreasing, troops physically.
Sadiq Siddiqui, does the Afghan government want a re-injection of American troops?
We do need support from our international allies as the United States. Yeah, we do need more advisors in the framework of NATO assist and advise mission. That's absolutely the need. We do have to focus on the training and to increase the capacity and capability of our security forces. There is no doubt that at this stage we will need support from our big allies such as the United States and many other countries who have been with Afghanistan for so many years now, so that we are still facing terrorism. There are still potential of getting together and stand firm against terrorism. But of course, we cannot do it alone. We have been fighting terrorism on behalf of everyone in Afghanistan, but we should not be left alone. So there's a need. There's a need for the continuation of these help and supports so that we can stand up on our own. Absolutely, we appreciate the international community's engagement in Afghanistan for so many years now, and that has helped us and the country not to become a safe haven for terrorists like it was before 2001. So that's the reality we have to keep in mind.
Sadiq, talking about terrorists, Daesh is in the background. The United States dropped the mother of all bombs on Daesh, as they called it, very recently. Former President Hamid Karzai has been talking a lot quite recently, and he said, and I'm going to quote him, he said, "I consider Daesh an American tool. I do not differentiate between Daesh and America." Sadiq, does that sound reasonable to you, or does it sound like a man who's trying to wiggle himself back into the political system?
That's absolutely not reasonable. Of course, that's not true. Daesh is a common enemy for everyone, for the Americans, for the Russians, and for everyone. That's why we have to mobilize all our potentials to fight Daesh. You know, the bomb was used against the main safe havens and hideouts of Daesh in Nangarhar. So that was very important step and hard decision to take in order to wipe out the main bases of Daesh in Nangarhar. So as you might have seen also reports that that bomb has never caused any damage to the people local in Nangarhar, and even people in Nangarhar, in Achin, they say that they were happy and even they wanted more of these kind of attacks against Daesh, because what atrocity they have brought to the Afghan people, that has to be not forgotten. They have killed many people in a very, very, horrible ways, and they are the enemies of Afghanistan, of the US, of the Russians, and everybody's enemies they are. That's why there's an international consensus how to fight Daesh, and we have to be very serious, and we have to take hard decisions using that kind of means to wipe out Daesh in their hideouts.
Okay, I'm really sad that we've run out of time, because this has been a fantastic conversation, a much needed conversation. Orzula Ashraf Nemat and Sadiq Siddiqui, it's been a pleasure talking to both of you. Outrage against the treatment of gay people in Russia has shifted to a small town in the Republic of Chechnya, where rights groups say more than 100 people have been detained on suspicion of being homosexual. A Russian human rights group says the prisoners have been beaten and tortured here in Argun, where a military base has been turned into a prison camp. Meanwhile, Chechnya's local government has denied that gay people even exist in the area. Well, the government spokesman said if there were such people in Chechnya, law enforcement agencies wouldn't need to have anything to do with them, because their relatives would send them somewhere from which there is no returning. Svetlana Zakharova joins us now from St. Petersburg. She's an activist from the Russian LGBT network, which has been at the forefront of bringing attention to those suspected or being detained. Thanks so much for joining us, Svetlana. Can we be absolutely certain that gay people are being detained and tortured in Chechnya right now?
Yes, we are absolutely certain. I can say more. We started the evacuation like almost 3 weeks ago, and we have already evacuated quite many people. So there are LGBT people in Chechnya for sure.
I was reading some stories of individuals, right? And they were talking about honey traps. They were talking about, men saying, "I'll meet you somewhere," and then luring them into these traps, and then other men beating them up and filming them and so on. Now, is it possible that this is just the actions of thugs and not necessarily state-sanctioned?
Well, we believe that there should be investigation to understand what's really going on there. But we believe that state at some extent is involved. Because it's just impossible that hundreds of people are being tortured, detained, and even killed. And there is no reaction from the government. And the reaction that was from the government actually shows something and says something.
Mm-hmm. Kadyrov calls these provocative articles about the Chechen Republic, he calls them the supposed events and detentions. Vladimir Putin's spokesperson says the accusations are slanderous. What do you make of that?
Well, what can I say? We have those people, we have testimonies, we have people who were tortured, and they came they left Chechnya and they're ready to give testimonies. And right now we have information that the investigative committee, Federal Investigative Committee, started to investigate this process. So let's see what's going on. But like those people who already arrived from Chechnya, they definitely were detained and they definitely were tortured.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of responsibility, do you think it's possible that if Vladimir Putin told Ramzan Kadyrov, hey, cut this out, put an end to this, do you think he'd be able to do so?
Well, hopefully. I know that Chechnya is a kind of very specific region, but it's still part of Russia, and it's still about Russian citizens being killed and tortured, so there should be some authority.
Alvi Karimov, the spokesman for Kadyrov, some of our viewers heard a little bit of that earlier, where he said if such people even existed in Chechnya, their families would take care of them. We wouldn't have to do anything about that. What's your response to that?
Well, it's just unbelievable that in the legal, such things can happen right now in a public space, that a public person could say such hate speeches without any punishment. And basically what we have already did, we also applied to the investigative committee and asked to check those hate speeches. Because basically we believe that this is call to murder of people.
Did you hear about the resolution that came out of the mosque in Grozny?
Yes, we have heard about that.
Now, some bits of that include a statement that says the centuries-old traditions of Chechen society, the dignity of Chechen men, and our faith have all been insulted, and we promise that those behind it will face reprisals, whoever they are and wherever they are. Now, when they say those behind it facing reprisals, who do you think they're talking about?
Well, first of all, probably they talk about the journalist of Novaya Gazeta, who started this story. But, it was just impossible not to start this story because it's about people who are killed. And it's just impossible not to react.
Mm-hmm. And now, okay, so we have questions of behavior in the Caucasus and practices in the Caucasus. To what extent is this representative of something that's going on across Russia?
Well, of course, Russia is a homophobic country, but we have never seen such a level of violence. We have never heard about such a massive campaign about any group of people in the modern Russia. So what's going on in Chechnya right now is just unprecedented.
Do you believe it's a pogrom against gay people?
Well, it's definitely a campaign against gay people.
Why would Kadyrov want to do this? Help me understand. Why would he be interested in persecuting gay people so openly in the year 2017?
Well, probably he didn't expect that this information, or anybody who's doing it, that they don't expect this information is going to become public. And why? Well, homosexuality itself is a huge stigma in Chechnya. It's a stigma not only for the person itself, but also for all the family. So probably there should be some weird reason.
Is there any silver lining here? Is there anything that encourages you from the authorities or those in civil society who are pushing back?
What do you mean?
Well, have you heard anything in the past few days, for example, in the wake of these revelations that makes you think perhaps this will stop sometime soon?
Well, yes, as I said before, first 2 weeks, the federal authorities were absolutely silent about this situation, and they didn't talk about that despite all the international pressures. They kind of pretended that it's not happening right now in Russia. But now they started to do something, and at first the prosecutor's office of Chechnya stated that they are going to open the investigation, and then we have information that the Federal Investigative Committee started to do something. So there is still hope that all the responsible sides will be punished.
Are you confident that they're going to take it seriously?
Well, I believe that they will take it seriously because too much attention is paid right now to this situation. And it's not surprising, it's not just about discrimination of homosexual people, it's about people being tortured and killed.
Mm-hmm. If Mr. Kadyrov was watching this program, what would your message be to him?
Oh, I don't think that I have any message for him.
If you had the opportunity to speak your mind to him, what would that be?
Well, I don't know. I probably would say that all people deserve life and all people have human dignity, and all people have basic human rights. The right not to be tortured, not to be killed, at least. These are very basic things.
Svetlana Zakharova, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much. They say you don't really understand someone until you've walked a mile in their shoes. Well, a new app aims to give you that experience as a Rohingya Muslim. It turns your smartphone into one owned by a fictional Rohingya girl, receiving texts and phone calls from her friends and family members who find themselves in trouble and have to escape from their homes. Take a look.
Where are you? Do you manage to get away? Oh no!
That's all for this edition of the Newsmakers with me, Imran Garda. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.